Roots of Wisdom, Indigenous Philosophies of Nigeria, Chapter 1, The Unwritten Libraries of Nigeria, Spirituality, Curriculum Use, Epistemology, Storytelling, Proverb. When the roots are forgotten, the tree leans on strangers for strength. Yoruba, saying long before the first chalk scratched a lesson on a colonial blackboard, before ink met paper in the making of Western curricula. Nigeria's earth held its own books, not bound in covers but carved into the rhythm of drum beats, spoken by firelight, encoded in shrines, carried in calabashes, remembered in the bones of elders, and whispered through the rustle of palm fronds. These were the unwritten libraries, and they are still alive. There are wisdoms that do not need to be written to be real. In the grooves of traditional dance steps, in the pause before a proverb is completed, in the gaze of a diviner drawing signs on sacred dust, there lies a system, a full epistemology that rivals the scrolls of Alexandria or the footnotes of Kant. Nigeria's indigenous philosophies are not primitive musings or quaint cultural artifacts. They are complex, living systems of thought, ethics, and cosmology. They speak of who we are, how we ought to live, and what it means to be fully human. This book, Nigerian Roots of Wisdom, begins not with a linear argument, but with a return to the source. The silence of the curriculum. Walk into any classroom in Lagos, Enugu, Kano, or Makurdi and ask this question: who taught you your Ori? You may see confused looks. Ask, what is Tsav? Or how does Mbiam work? And you'll likely meet silence. Not the silence of ignorance, but the silence of dispossession. The tragedy is not that our children don't know their ancestral philosophies. It's that they were never given the chance. The colonial education project, despite its usefulness in many ways, systematically buried Nigeria's epistemologies under foreign syllabi. Christianity and Islam, while rich in their own right, were often wielded as bulldozers, not bridges. And so, the philosophies of Ifa, Odinani, Tiv, Kanuri, Ebibio, and Jukun were driven underground, dismissed as superstition or demonized as paganism. But what if we paused? What if we treated these systems as we treat any philosophy, with respect, inquiry, and application? What is an indigenous philosophy? It is not merely a collection of rituals or mythologies. An indigenous philosophy is a worldview. It answers the deep questions. Who are we? Why are we here? What is truth? How should we live? It is ethical, emphasizing good character, iwa pele, moral justice, ofo na ogu, spiritual purity, tsav. It is ecological, revering the earth, ala ane, sacred groves, as a living being. It is metaphysical, understanding that what is seen is only a shadow of what is real. It is communal, teaching that I am because we are, long before Ubuntu was made famous. But it is also practical. These philosophies were used to settle land disputes, guide marriages, choose leaders, heal illnesses, raise children, and connect with the divine. And yet, today, they remain sidelined, coded as culture instead of curriculum. 3 voices, 1 wisdom. To understand indigenous Nigerian philosophy is to listen with 3 ears. The first is the voice of the storyteller, the griot, the elder, the drummer. The second is the voice of the tradition, the Ifa verse, the proverb, the dance. The third is the voice of interpretation, the teacher, the scholar, the youth in search of meaning. These 3 must come together, like the 3 stones that hold the cooking pot steady. Take this Ifa verse, for example. Ori laba bo, aki bo orisa. It is the inner head we should worship, not the Orisha. At first glance, it appears to dismiss the Orisha. But listen again. The verse honors Ori, our inner consciousness, as the ultimate guide. This is metaphysics. This is psychology. This is ethics, a lesson in self-accountability told through spiritual reverence. Case study: the Tiv Cosmogram. The Tiv people of central Nigeria believe in Ayondo, the supreme being, and Akombo, sacred forces that dwell in people and objects. The balance between Tsav, spiritual power, and moral behavior is seen not just as personal but cosmic. In modern terms, this is an ecosystemic moral framework. Imagine teaching climate ethics through Tsav, where abusing the land is not just harmful, but spiritually disruptive. The griot meets Google. How do we preserve these wisdoms? Not by digitizing alone, but by dignifying. Imagine Ifa in the classroom, not as a religion, but as a logic system. Students learning binary patterns from Odu Ifa before tackling computer science. Odinani taught in ethics classes, comparing Chi with the Western concept of a conscience. Jukun's spiritual kingship explored alongside Plato's philosopher king. TikTok channels sharing daily Oriki affirmations. This is not nostalgia. This is necessity. We must let our roots speak into the future. From memory to movement, this chapter is an invitation, an invocation, a call to remember that Nigeria's greatness is not only in its oil or markets or youthful population, but in its stored-up, often suppressed indigenous wisdom. This wisdom is a gift not just to Nigeria, but to the world. But only if we remember, only if we teach, only if we listen. Let us not allow our sacred philosophies to become museum pieces. Let them dance again, on the tongues of youth, in the policies of government, in the rhythms of technology, in the silence of prayer. Ase, ritual prompt. Speak to your root. Sit in silence for 5 minutes today. Ask yourself, not, what do I want, but what does my Ori want? Listen. Write one line that comes from within. That is the beginning of wisdom. Glossary. Selected terms. Ori. Inner head. Personal destiny. Consciousness. Yoruba. Ayondo. Supreme God. Tiv. Chi. Personal spirit or divine spark. Igbo. Ela. Earth goddess and moral order. Igbo. Mbiam. Spiritual oath or force. Ibibio. Odu Ifa. Sacred verses in Yoruba divination. Iwa Pele. Gentle, good character. Yoruba. Tsav. Spiritual power or life force. Tiv. Discussion questions. 1. What forms of knowledge have been excluded from your own education? 2. How can indigenous philosophies be taught without distorting their sacredness? 3. In what ways can technology amplify, rather than erase, ancestral wisdom? Chapter 2. Oral wisdom. Knowledge without books, storytelling. Spirituality. Epistemology. Curriculum. Use proverb. The mouth of the elder is the library of the village. Hausa proverb. In the stillness of dusk, when the last market call fades and the firewood crackles to life, something sacred begins. Child shifts closer. An elder clears their throat. A tale unfolds, not just to entertain, but to teach. There are no footnotes, no projectors, no chalk. Yet, in this moment, knowledge as old as iron smelting, as nuanced as social harmony, as complex as quantum theory in its own right, is passed on. This is oral wisdom, and it is Nigeria's first university. The ear before the eye. In many Nigerian cultures, the ears were taught before the eyes. Knowledge was not first encountered on paper, but in sound. To learn was to listen, not just with attention, but with reverence. Listening was a spiritual act. The voice carried frequency and fire. Stories were coded archives. Proverbs were encrypted ethics. Songs were syllabi. Before Western literacy arrived, entire bodies of law, ethics, cosmology, medicine, and agricultural science were transmitted orally with astonishing precision. Among the Yoruba, the sacred corpus of Ifa, over 256 Odu with thousands of verses, was memorized and performed by Babalawos with accuracy rivaling any scribe. Among the Igbo, knowledge of Chai, Ofo na Ogu, and ancestral justice was passed through lineage chants and seasonal rituals. In the north, the Bori priestesses sang the names and characteristics of spirits in songs that doubled as spiritual diagnosis and psychological therapy. These were not informal musings. They were structured, intentional, and refined over centuries. The griot, the dibia, and the drum, each society had its transmitters of wisdom. The griot. Among Hausa, Nupe, and other Middle Belt groups, the griot, or praise singer, was a memory keeper, historian, and moral mirror. With drums, flutes, and voice, they preserved genealogies and inter-kingdom treaties with detail that rivaled European archives. The dibia. Among the Igbo, the dibia was more than a healer. They were a spiritual scientist. Their chants were diagnostic tools, their rituals encoded in layered song poetry, each syllable precise. A mispronunciation could shift spiritual alignment like a wrong variable in an equation. The drum. Among the Yoruba, the talking drum was not metaphor. It literally spoke. Messages were transmitted across villages using tonal languages. A skilled drummer could recite proverbs, give warnings, even narrate events with percussive syntax. The drum became both book and broadcast. Why oral does not mean inferior? Let us cast off the colonial lie that orality is a lesser form of knowledge transmission. Oral systems are not chaotic. They are embodied. They live in breath, in rhythm, in time. They are adaptive and encoded with multiple meanings. A single story may teach history, ethics, cosmology, and humor all at once. Oral systems allow for interactivity. The audience becomes part of the transmission through call and response, through interpretation, through ritual reenactment. Oral traditions honor memory as sacred. They train the mind to retain, recite, reinterpret. In this way, the body becomes the book. The lineage becomes the library. The community becomes the classroom. In fact, the modern world is now turning back to oral forms through podcasts, audiobooks, spoken word, and even YouTube channels. But our ancestors never left it. Case study, a Tiv night circle. In a Tiv village, a child asks, "Why do people die?" An elder responds, not with biology, but with story. Once the yam sent a message to Iondo, but the lizard ate the message. Iondo, not knowing our sorrow, closed the sky. The story goes on, linking death, disobedience, cosmic order, and agricultural cycles. It teaches metaphysics, ethics, and food science in one tale. It links the heavens to the soil. The listener does not merely understand, it remembers. Modern echoes of oral wisdom in Nigerian pop music, in Nollywood, in street parables. Oral wisdom continues. Listen to a grandmother pray over her grandchild in Ibibio. Her words encode theology, ecology, psychology. A 1-minute blessing carries generations of philosophy. This is not superstition. This is sophisticated oral encryption. Social movements like Hat End SARS borrowed from oral methods too. Chants, call and response, viral voice notes. Activism, like tradition, still speaks aloud. The risk of silence, but with the rise of screen-based education and English-only curricula, the oral chain phrase. Children now say, "Grandpa talks too much." Songs once sung under moonlight are now forgotten under fluorescent bulbs. We risk a silence deeper than illiteracy, the silence of cultural amnesia. Preservation is participation. To preserve oral wisdom, we must use it. Let students learn history through folk tales. Let proverbs become classroom discussions. Let chants be part of healing centers. Let audio archives be built, not just written ones. Let the griot sit beside the professor. And most of all, let us teach our youth to listen, not just to facts, but to frequency. Call and response. Can you hear the ancestors? Yes, they are still speaking. Ritual practice. Record a voice of wisdom. Find an elder in your family or community. Ask them to share one story they learned by ear. Record it. Transcribe it. Listen again. What is the lesson between the words? What do you feel? Share it with someone younger than you. Glossary. Selected terms. Daibia. Igbo, spiritual healer and philosopher. Babalawo. Yoruba, diviner of Ifa corpus. Griot, oral historian and praise singer. Aondo, supreme deity in Tiv cosmology. Ori, spirit possession tradition in the Hausa region. Ofo na Ogu, truth and justice. Igbo philosophical principle, discussion questions. 1. What forms of oral knowledge have shaped your own identity? 2. How can schools and media help preserve Nigerian oral traditions? 3. In what ways can digital tools complement, not replace, oral transmission? Chapter 3. Proverbs as philosophy, ethics, language, curriculum use, spirituality. Proverb. A single tree cannot make a forest. Igbo proverb. A proverb is a river in a drop, a whole world view wrapped in a sentence. It is both mirror and map. It is small, but it stretches infinitely. In Nigeria, proverbs are not simply decorative sayings. They are living philosophies, embedded in speech, ritual, governance, and everyday decisions. They encode complex systems of ethics, metaphysics, social contracts, and ecological wisdom in compact, memorable phrases. They are the people's philosophy, spoken, sung, and passed like sacred seeds from tongue to tongue. To understand Nigerian proverbs is to unlock a code, one that has guided communities for centuries without the need for academic institutions. Here, wisdom does not wear a professor's robe. It walks in the marketplace. It sings at a child's naming ceremony. It wrestles in the elder's tone. It stirs inside palm wine conversations. The structure of a thought universe. Let us begin with the structure. Nigerian proverbs across ethnic groups share common traits. Symbolic language. Animals, trees, rivers, and everyday objects stand in for abstract ideas. Metaphorical logic. Proverbs don't state, they show. They don't explain, they illustrate. Mnemonic power, rhythmic and concise, they are easily remembered and repeated. Contextual elasticity. One proverb can carry multiple meanings depending on tone, context, and audience. Moral weight. They are not neutral, they teach what is right, good, and wise. When a Yoruba elder says, Tiomode ba subu, awo iwaju, tiagbalagba ba subu, awo ehin. When a child falls, he looks forward. When an elder falls, he looks back. It's more than a witty contrast. It's a meditation on experience, memory, and foresight. Ethics encoded in aphorism. Consider this. He who brings kola brings life. Igbo on the surface, it seems a simple ritual phrase. But look closer. It affirms hospitality as life-giving, grounding social ethics in a shared sense of nourishment. It binds together the ideas of reciprocity, gratitude, and peace-building. A kola nut is not just a snack, it is a contract. Or this Yoruba saying, Iwa lewa. Character is beauty. This is an ethical manifesto. In a world obsessed with appearance, this proverb flips the script. Beauty is not in form, but in Iwa, moral character. It challenges vanity, reinforces humility, and places ethical behavior at the center of cultural worth. Proverbs guide moral decisions not with laws, but with layers. They don't instruct, they invite contemplation, philosophy of the self and the other. The self in Nigerian philosophy is never isolated. Proverbs reinforce that identity is relational, not individualistic. I am because we are. This famous Ubuntu saying, echoed across African cultures, finds its Nigerian mirrors in phrases like, if the left hand washes the right hand will wash the left. Yoruba. No matter how tall a tree is, its leaves will fall to the ground. Tiv. These sayings remind us that success, failure, joy, and death are communal experiences. The ego is tempered by the tribe. You cannot rise without lifting others. Political wisdom in disguise. Nigerian proverbs are also tools of diplomacy and resistance. The lion does not turn around when a small dog barks. Hausa, this asserts dignity without confrontation, ideal for navigating power dynamics with calm restraint. Even the smallest ant can make the king dance if it enters his robe. Urhobo, this proverb subverts hierarchy. It warns those in power. Underestimate the lowly at your peril. When elders deliberate over chieftaincy disputes or land issues, they don't cite policy, they cite proverbs. In doing so, they weave justice with poetry, ecological and cosmological wisdom. Nigeria's proverbs are also eco-philosophical. The river that forgets its source will dry up. Yoruba, a warning against disconnection from land, ancestors, tradition. You do not test the depth of a river with both feet. Igbo, a lesson in caution, applicable to nature, relationships, and decision-making. Even the smallest plant knows where the sun rises. Tiv, a spiritual affirmation of divine orientation within all living things. In these sayings, nature is not backdrop. It is teacher, mirror, and sacred partner. The Oriki, as living archive among the Yoruba, Oriki, praise poetry, functions as a protracted form of proverb, personalized for individuals, families, towns. It weaves ancestry, character traits, spiritual identity, and destiny into rhythmic invocations, spoken over children, warriors, and the sick. Oriki is not just descriptive, it's activating, a verbal ceremony that calls the soul into alignment. Oriki functions like a poetic proverb. He who walks like thunder with the chest of an antelope, who greets the gods before the cock crows. Yes, that one. Here, speech becomes identity, power, and prophecy. Contemporary rebirth today, Nigerian proverbs are making a comeback. In music, film, memes, and motivational speeches. Afrobeats artists lace lyrics with proverbs. Nollywood scripts embed them in climactic scenes. Instagram captions quote elders now gone. TikTok creators will remix them with humor and reflection. Why? Because proverbs still speak truth. Because people crave rooted wisdom in an unrooted world. They offer cultural memory in a chaotic age, but they must also be taught intentionally. In classrooms, in youth mentorship, in diaspora retreats, not just as decoration, but as foundational philosophy. Ritual prompt, proverb journal. Each morning for 1 week, begin your day by writing down a Nigerian proverb. Sit with it. What does it mean today? How does it challenge or comfort you? What action might it inspire? Let each proverb become your teacher. Glossary, selected terms. Oriki, Yoruba praise poetry, combining history, spirit, and identity. Iwa, character, behavior, essence. Yoruba. Ofo na ogu, truth and justice. Igbo, moral standard. Ubuntu, I am because we are. Pan-African relational philosophy. Ase, spiritual force or authority, power to make things happen. Discussion questions. 1. How do proverbs shape the moral imagination of a community? 2. What proverbs have guided your life, knowingly or unknowingly? 3. How can Nigerian proverbs be used as entry points into philosophy classes?